What is contact? What is contact? And you might be wondering, what do you mean by contact? Well, to rip off the band-aid right away, what I'm talking about is contact with extraterrestrial civilizations or intelligences. So this is a bit of an offshoot from my videos, although I guess not really, because I am just talking about whatever comes to me on the day of recording. And when I was meditating earlier, this came through very strongly. Now, of course, this past week has been very much steeped in that kind of world, and I'll talk about that in a minute, what I mean by that. So before I get started, though, this topic, as I was contemplating on what to speak about today, it brought up some fears about speaking about this. It is quite interesting, though, whenever fear comes up, at least for me. It is because there is a shortcut to something bigger, better, or greater in whatever shape or form as it pertains to my life. So this is what I learned from one of my mentors, Dan Olschwang, and he said, on your journey of on the spiritual path, on your journey of inner healing, of introspection, of finding out who you really are, on this journey, which is not an easy journey at all, you will often see, or rather miss, great opportunities or shortcuts, as he calls it, for accelerated growth. And that is whenever you bump against something that stirs up fear within you. And the recommended step for that is lean into the fear, face it head on, face it directly, and release it in the process. So here I am talking about a subject that I'm afraid to talk about. Well, why? I don't really know why, because there's a lot of stigma around it. There's a lot of misconception, a lot of misinformation, disinformation, a lot of propaganda, and all kinds of weird stuff really going on in this space. So, but you know what? I don't really care. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it from my perspective and my experience in it, and take it for what it is. Maybe there's something you can learn from it, maybe not. Either way, let's get into it. So, and by the way, before I start, this time you will see me look down at a piece of paper in front of me, because there's a lot of things I want to cover in this video and I don't want to miss anything. So this will be one of the videos where, full disclosure, pun intended, that I will be having some notes in front of me, but just bullet points. Otherwise, it's just, whatever comes through. So, my experience at Contact in the Desert. So Contact in the Desert is an annual it's touted as the, Woodstock of UFO folklore, or, event experience, whatever you want to call it. And it was my first time. I wasn't really interested in going by my own volition, but two men that are in my life that I greatly respect, both, they don't know each other. They've actually met at first time at Contact, but I respect them both greatly, and they each individually said that I should definitely come to Contact in the Desert. They didn't really say why, but because I trust their word, then I just said, okay, I'm going to surrender to that invitation and just see what happens. And they said, you don't even have to buy a ticket. It's free to walk around. The only thing you need tickets for really is to go into the workshops and the speakers. And I wasn't really interested in watching any of the speakers, because you can watch their videos online anyway. Workshops, I wasn't really interested either. I just wanted to be there for the experience, to connect with people, just to be there and walk around and see what happens, which is what I like to do at events like this. Just be in the flow and stay in the moment and watch the magic unfold. And it's been a great experience ever since. So anyway, I went to Contact in the Desert, and without any expectations, I just went in there fully open and surrendered to whatever might be. So it became very clearly evident very quickly to me that this is sort of um, the annual pinnacle, if you will, of UFO researchers, science, experiencers, or contactees, um, writers, authors, you name it. Everyone's there. And it's not just about the UFO phenomenon, it's also about our own innate human abilities, or what's called ESP, or extrasensory perception, um, in that in the way that we can develop these higher intuitive or higher spiritual powers, such as telepathy, or kines. I forgot what it's called. But the extrasensory abilities, like superpowers, as they are referred to in movies and books and such. So it's sort of everything about the supernormal, or the extraordinary, that we can't really explain. And like I said, I didn't even look at the schedule, really, at the lineup of speakers and what they have to say and what each of the talks are about. I just went there to connect with people. And so I went there, and it became very clearly evident that this is really a, shall we say, multidimensional experience, because you can, go to the talks and go to the workshops, and that's one experience. But if you just stay out on the, vendor areas, and you just talk to people and you mix and mingle, that's a whole other different experience. So, long story short, I realized that there are some very, very high level, high vibrational people there, vendors, channelers, healers. There were phenomenal healers there. Scientists, people, engineers, people that have developed certain technologies that we can use to heal ourselves, or to strengthen our spiritual powers, whatever the case may be. So it's like the latest cutting edge healing technology. Spiritual people that help you strengthen your aura, or like do a reading on your soul's purpose, all kinds of things, but legitimate. Okay, so I've been sort of in and out of this space for a while, so I can very quickly tell when someone is legit and when someone is a snake oil salesman or saleswoman. Anyway, so all the people that I interacted with, and I didn't interact with all of them, but the ones I did, they were certainly of the highest caliber and legitimate. So one thing that really stood out to me, there was a man by the name of Joshua Sizzler, and his company, his movement is called Ancient Aztlan. He is a hobby archaeologist, if you will. He got into this several years ago, and he's primarily digging in Mexico, because he found and continues to find these ancient alien artifacts that are made from a material that we have no reference for. He has examined these relics, the material of these, in independent labs. They couldn't come up with anything that is remotely related to anything on Earth, even though it looks kind of like a stone. It looks like a quartzy kind of stone, most of them, but the material is something of a strange composite, a rather unusual composite of different elements together, but that have been combined in a way that is impossible, first of all, for us to recreate on Earth with our current technology. And secondly, when they, that was the first round in the lab. When they had no results really from, to determine what it is, then Joshua went on to go to a different lab that had some kind of $3 million machine, microscope, what have you, that was able to really zoom into and examine the atomic structure of this material. And again, it was, don't ask me about the science, but if you go to his website, or if you follow him on Instagram, you can ask him about these questions, and he constantly posts about all the findings that he makes. So anyway, our best equipment, our best scientific equipment cannot explain what this material is, and we have no reference for it on any kind of material for that on Earth. So these artifacts have been carbon dated to at least 7,000 to 11,000, and other have been dated to even beyond that, right? So think about that. These artifacts are up to 11,000 years old, maybe even older. They haven't carbon dated every single piece, but the few that they have, go as far back as 11,000 years and even beyond that. And they all tell a story. So when you look at these pictures, first of all, the engraving is done with such precision and 3D precision that you can't recreate this on Earth right now with what we have, not even with lasers, high precision lasers. So the etchings and the detail of it is down to the nanometer. Such precision doesn't exist right now, at least to our knowledge, okay? And it tells a story of these extraterrestrial, whether they are visitors or they were here all along. That is inconclusive right now. And now it does show us a story from at least the few artifacts that they were able to translate, is that these beings, these interstellar beings, gave us, mankind, great knowledge, great spiritual knowledge, by the way. There is often depictions of how they initiate or teach the human being how to be in greater harmony with the universe, with God, with their own spiritual powers. And there were lots of artifacts that were designed to be worn by humans. There were even pipes, tobacco pipes, but very incredibly shaped and incredibly adorned and with intricate details. So there is a story about our past that evidently has been buried, and mainstream archaeology is not touching that, not even with a 10-foot pole. Okay? They've tried, they want to know. Because this discovery is so shattering that we may have to rewrite all of our history books and throw out everything we think we know about the universe, about our solar system, about ourselves, about other life forms in the universe. Everything. I mean, this could turn everything on its head. Okay. Now, that being said, it's not all roses and rainbows. Obviously, similar to having different nations here on Earth and different agendas as it relates to those nations, we can assume that's the same case in the wider universe. There are certain civilizations that have the best interest in mind for us, and there are certain civilizations, as it turns out, that may have already infiltrated us. And I don't want to cause any fear with this. It's very difficult to get any empirical evidence for it. But let's say if you want to put it this way, you are a human, right? And you are experimenting with ants, shall we say? Okay, very different forms of consciousness, right? You as a human obviously have a much greater awareness, a much greater consciousness than an ant. So you could, manipulate the ant without the ant even knowing it, right? Without the ant even seeing you. They think you're a tree, or they think you're a rock or something, whatever. We don't know if they even think that. But think of it this way, okay? The known universe is billions, maybe even trillions of years old. And to think that we are the only and best intelligence that the universe has to offer, doesn't really add up. So anyway, all that to say is it all comes back to your own discernment, your heart discernment, not in the mind, okay? The mind is very easy to deceive, but the heart isn't. So that's also what I went in there with. I was with my heart open, and I was sort of feeling like, who do I want to interact with, and who doesn't have the vibe that I want to interact with. and it was a wonderful experience. And I got to meet new friends and new possible collaborators on my path. And there were some people that I didn't interact with at all, and I just felt it. Okay, so next one, I want to talk about Big Rock. So Big Rock is the biggest boulder in North America, somewhere in the desert. Right, that was about an hour and a half ish north of where we were with the conference of Contact in the Desert. And this was a tour, a self-driven tour that pulled us out into the desert about an hour and a half away, and we got a guided tour of this Big Rock, territory. There's this huge round boulder in the middle of nowhere. It is ancient Native American land that's very sacred to them, and it hasn't been touched except for a few military bases, of course, somewhere there around. And I'm not going to go into the story about what happened around the rock and what's the story. There was a guy actually living under the rock in the early 1900s, and then they had some kind of there was a contact experience right there at that rock, and there's lots of evidence for it too. And the guy that was contacted then went on to build the Integratron, which I'll talk about in a minute. Anyway, I wanted to show you this. Next to that Big Rock boulder, just a few 100 feet behind it, there was this huge, naturally occurring, we are told, formation, this huge mound of crystal quartz like this. White, crystal, pristine rock, just on, somewhere right there in the middle. And this was the only one out there in the desert. So we have this huge rock, and then behind it, this pretty large mound of crystal quartz, right? And so if you know anything about crystal quartz, it has piezoelectric properties and all kinds of stuff. It has memory, okay? It stores data. You can store data on crystal. Anyway, so what I noticed, we did a little ceremony on there for world peace, and what I noticed, the power of these crystals. These are ancient, right? So they hold memory, they hold energy, they hold data, and when I hold these two, it has a very common effect, and it's not just me. I've had other people obviously were collecting these crystals, but I've had other people once I came back home hold these in their hand, and they all say the same thing. It has a calming effect. So try to explain that. Now, next thing is the actual Big Rock pieces. So these are little pieces from the Big Rock, because it actually, this is the outside here, it actually split randomly. In the early 2000s, this big rock, this big boulder, actually split. About 20% of it just split off in the early morning hours. And no one knows why. Look up the story for yourself. It was complete and whole until the early 2000s, and then it just one part just broke off. And interestingly enough, there is an ancient Native American prophecy that this boulder would split in the future. And if it were to split right down the middle, then humanity would go extinct. If it did not split right down the middle, which it didn't, then humanity is going to be okay. So I suppose we're going to be okay. But these pieces, when I hold these, they feel electric. They feel energetic. They feel energy giving. So whereas the other ones were calming, these are energetic or energy giving. So it's almost like there's a microcurrent of electricity flowing through them. And again, it's not just me. Other people have held these and they say the exact same thing. So again, how can modern science explain that these two seemingly innate, objects, stone, can create these physical, tangible experiences with our body. So that was Big Rock in the desert. And then after that, we went to the Integratron. And again, you can look this up. The Integratron was built by an engineer, a retired engineer, who was contacted at Big Rock to build this specific structure. Now, unfortunately, the structure was never fully completed. As he was about 95% finished with it, he suddenly died. And he did get a warning from some military men that he should not proceed building the finished version of this structure. So we don't know actually what happened. This is a lot of conspiracy around it, obviously, but fact is that it was never completed, because the intention and the technology that was supposed to be this Integratron was a time machine, and or what did he say? An aura balancing and a chakra aligning evolution machine. So the idea was you would go in there and you would walk a few rounds on the bottom, and due to its specific properties, and there was a part on the top that was spinning at very high speeds, creating an enormous amount of electricity, very similar to a Tesla tower, actually. So it's similar to what Tesla was working on, it appears, from what we have heard, from what we know this Integratron was supposed to be. So, and if you were to go in there, it would have such an enormous energetic field, a positively charged energetic field, that would align your chakras, heal your aura, energetically clean you, whatever you needed to do. So that was basically an evolution machine. It was a spiritual evolution machine that just by spending a few minutes in there walking around in circles, you would be charged in such a way that your consciousness is lifted up to the next level. So whether you believe in that or not is up to you. What it is today, basically, yes, it is a tourist attraction, but the upper dome has perfect acoustics. In fact, many artists, many musicians had concerts there. For example, Jason Mraz, he had a concert there. And now they host sound baths in there, sound bath healing sessions. And we had a quick tour, and we got a miniature sound bath experience that was absolutely incredible. The sound from these bowls was reverberating in our bones. I could feel it vibrating in my bones. I'd never had any experience like that, because the sound is bouncing off of these dome-shaped walls in such a way that it's 360, not just 360, but it's like everywhere. And in the middle, when you stand right in the center of the dome and you speak, you hear your voice from coming back at you from all angles, back, front, up, down, everything. So it's a very unique, mathematically perfect proportion that harmonizes and amplifies sound to such a degree that you can feel it in your bones. So I certainly would love to have a full sound bath experience there. They are unfortunately booked out for months in advance. So if you're interested in that, just be aware to plan ahead accordingly. So, and now I want to talk about my contact experience, which I never thought I would share, but here we go. A couple of years ago, I went to Arizona to a weekend with Dr. Stephen Greer. And if you're familiar with his work, he's all about making peaceful, highly conscious contact with these advanced civilizations. And CE5 is what it's called. So CE5 stands for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. All the other CEs from 1 through 4 are basically ET initiated, right? So it's involuntary contact, basically. But when we set the intention and go into a deep state of meditation and use our remote viewing powers to send out a peace signal, basically, with our consciousness into the cosmos and see if anyone picks up the phone, so to speak, then we might receive contact. And Dr. Stephen Greer has been doing this since the early 90s, and he has lots of footage of positive contact. And all the, not all, but a lot of the people that went with him to these excursions and these expeditions, they report the same thing. They have lots of videos and pictures and whatnot. So anyway, Dr. Greer said, as we were preparing for the CE5 experience on Sunday night at the end of the weekend on Native American land, by the way, in the desert, he said that contact is nonlinear. Okay, so these interdimensional, interstellar civilizations, they don't perceive time like we do in a linear fashion. Okay, they have mastered time travel. They bend time all the time, right? So he said, if contact may not happen tonight, but if they wish to contact you, then it may happen tomorrow, it may happen a week from now, it may happen a month from now. We don't know, because then time is illinear. The signal is out there if you send it, and it's up to them when they will pick it up. Okay, and it's also, we have to understand that it's rather dangerous for them to contact us because, well, our military-industrial complex, as you probably know, has kept a very, very tight lid on this whole subject. Okay, so I don't expect any real disclosure coming from them, because it would completely invert our current human paradigm. Most of all, our energy paradigm. Okay, we would no longer be dependent on big oil if we have free energy, anti-gravitics and all that stuff. And it's, we've mastered it. It's just that the deep black off-budget projects with some of these military contractors, they've reverse engineered some of these crafts in the early 1940s and 50s. So yeah, we have the technology. It's just not allowed for the public to use them. Anyway, as we did the meditation with Dr. Greer that night, we did see some rather unusual lights in two moments. They were very brief, but there was one sort of to the right of us coming over the hill that was green, and then one other time that was behind us. Most of us missed it because we were facing forward, but there was this flash of blue light, and it was not like a cop car blue light. It was a very intense, like almost laser-like, shining, bright, piercing light. And that was it. That was all we saw that night. I mean, it was a wonderful meditation. We were hundreds of people. Never experienced anything like this. But then, on my way home, as I was driving back home on Monday morning, I was listening to some music, and then all of a sudden, I was overcome with this intense love. It was such an intense love that burst my heart open. My heart chakra was on fire, if I can imagine that, but in a good way. It was such a massive burst of unconditional love that suddenly entered my body. I didn't know where or what this was or where it was coming from, and I started crying. I started crying out of love, out of joy, out of happiness and expansion. And I felt unconditional love for all of creation, including this earth, including every single human being, whether they were good or evil, it didn't matter. I just had this intense, unconditional love for everyone on the planet and, all of creation, like I said. And, whether you believe me or not, I don't really care. I'm just sharing my experience. And there were some downloads as well, and I wrote it all down, most of which I don't remember off the top of my head. But one download was that I'll never forget was that Yeshua is real. Jesus is real. And, what did he teach us? He was all about unconditional love. And so I don't know if this was some kind of E.T. contact experience or something else, but it was certainly something that I had never experienced in my life and never experienced ever since then. it was so intense. I mean, this lasted for, I want to say like 2, maybe even 3 hours as I was in the car. And it was so much. It was so much that I could barely handle it. I was sending out love to these, drivers that were next to me and in front of me and behind me on the road, on the highway, because I was just giving out love to everyone because it was too much for me to handle, too much for me to hold. And at some point, I had to pull the car over to the side of the highway and just like take a breather. I was walking around to calm down, and yeah, it was incredibly intense. So yeah, so when I get to that part in my journals, then I will post that obviously on the Substack. Um, there's a bit more that I have to get through, but if you stay with me, then you will read the whole experience when it's out. And last but not least, here's the final conclusion or final takeaway that I got from being in contact at the desert event. And before I get into that, I want to say that for me, I had a fantastic experience. It was very uplifting, very upshifting. There was a lot of very, very positive energy going around. And specifically with some of the healers that I worked with there, it was a major uplift in my energy field, in my awareness, and my consciousness. So I left there feeling very buzzed with beautiful, bright, positive energy. But, and this is an unfortunate but, what I realized is that if this is, the Woodstock of UFO, and the top of the top people in this field attend this conference, then we're not ready for contact, for public contact. And here's why. Most of the attendees were drinking alcohol. I saw some of them smoking cigarettes. Many of them were drinking coffee the next morning and, pigging out on hotel food. And I used to do all those things, and I wasn't aware that all these poisons, these daily poisons, are specifically designed for us to ingest in order to keep our vibration and our consciousness low. Because when our body is constantly fighting poisons, well, then it can't elevate to a higher state of consciousness. So, I was thinking to myself, like, wow, all these people, they come here, they spend this money to come to this, event once a year, and many of them come back, and it is. I'm probably going to be back next year because it was a great experience. But I saw, including one of these speakers and workshop facilitators, he's quite famous and popular in this space. I saw him drinking a beer out of a can and rolling himself a cigarette. Like, really? Here you are talking about elevating humanity to higher levels of consciousness so that we can make peaceful contact with these, advanced civilized races. And yet you are poisoning yourself with all the daily poisons that, well, are so readily available, that keep your consciousness low. So either you're not aware of what's really going on, or you're just a plant. You are controlled opposition, right? So that was a kind of a downer for me. And I talked to one of my friends who invited me, and he's a very clean, very spiritual person. He's been on a very dedicated, very clean path for many, many years. And so, I was talking to him like look at all these people. They're all drinking and smoking and having this disgusting hotel food. Like, is this what the best of the best of humanity? Supposedly, in the advanced sections of true science and advanced ET contact and high consciousness, this is the best we have to offer, and most of them are getting drunk every night. So that was kind of disappointing to me. But again, everyone's on their own journey, and I'm not judging anyone. But it was just a bit sad for me to see that so many are still not aware that all these daily poisons are really designed for not only mind control enhancement, but also to keep our consciousness low and our vibration low. So anyway, all that to say is this is my spiel on what is contact. And well, now it's up to you. What do you think? What do you feel about all this? And by the way, if you are on a spiritual path, then it is quite possible that you have been contacted. Maybe, maybe not. But just from the experience that I shared, have you had an experience like that? Have you had any kind of elevated, sudden realization or an expansion of consciousness or an expansion of your heart out of the blue? Because contact doesn't just mean that, a physical being manifests in front of you and is, talking to you physically with their mouth. Most of them don't even use the voice anymore. They have telepathic communication. Has it happened to you? I'd love to hear what you have to say about this topic. Am I completely off the rails here, or am I onto something? Well, let me know. Again, thank you for listening. Much love, and I'll see you on the path.